Alright guys, let's try some more Puzzle Rush here. I'm going to do survival mode again, and let's talk through some tactical positions. Looks like a hanging queen. They do start out fairly easy, and then they get harder. Another hanging queen. Hanging bishop. Hanging bishop. And alright, what's going on here? Looks like White's put himself in a position where he's going to have two hanging pieces. He's got the hanging bishop, and after I block this, he's got two. Saves the queen, and the bishop. What's going on here for White to move? Looks like mate 1. Black to move here. Mate 2. White to move here. Mate 1. And another mate 1. Hopefully you see this. This is a good pattern. And remember, almost all mates involve two or more pieces working together. And what do we got here? This looks like mate 2. Queen here, check. King's only moves here. Queen takes his mate. Good. So there's 10 complete, and you'll see that takes us up to a rating of about 550. Okay, they're just gradually starting to get harder. What's going on here for White? Looks like we're going to win the knight. Black promotes the pawn, but then we promote our pawn with a mate threat. And even if Black tries to check, I think we're good. So let's take that knight. Let's promote that pawn. Yep. Okay. Black to move here. I think this is a fork in a counting issue. If the knight forks queen and rook here, and this rook takes to prevent the fork, then rook takes, queen takes, rook takes with a check, bishop blocks, rook takes, so we end up winning material out of this. So let's try that. Boom. Yep. Alright, Black to move. This looks like a pin. Pin it and win it. You see the pin? This queen is sitting in a dangerous spot on the same diagonal as the king, and our knight supports this square, b4. Boom. Pinning the queen to the king. We win the queen. Here it looks like we have a distraction. This is a technique that's important to remember. It looks like White has a nice battery lined up on the F file. Rook supports queen, but the black queen is also attacking G1, and so is the rook. If I check with the rook, the king can't take. The rook has to, but the rook had a job to do. He was defending the queen. So I think we're going to win the white queen here. With a check, no less. Here, this is a very similar tactic to distraction. It's called overloading. It appears that the white queen is overloaded. She's got two jobs to do. She's defending two pieces. She can't possibly do both. So if we grab the knight, then she can no longer defend the rook. Good. Alright, this is kind of a tough pattern to see. I see this rook check, and just because you see a check doesn't mean you should play it. You got to think it out. This rook check, definitely looks like it's going to bring the black king here to this square, threatening the rook. And if he does that, then knight check. Both checks the king and defends the rook. And the king can't go here or here or here or here. I guess what we have to look at is what if we check here and the king goes there? Never mind, the king can't go there. Knight's on that square. So it looks like we got a mate in two here. And this is a beautiful move here. The knight attacks and defends. So here we're down some material, so we've got to pick up something here if we want to win, in spite of the fact that we've got a queen. So we've got to find a tactic, and I see a loose rook. I love this pawn, but I'm looking at this loose rook, and I see a fork here where we can check the king and win the rook. All right, this is an interesting position. I've got more attackers on this knight than black does, so I mean I could win it and then I'd end up trading queens, but that's not enough because I'm down material in this position, so even winning a knight is not enough. So if I check the king here, if the king wants to walk over here, then bishop takes an unthreatening mate on that square, which is going to force black to trade queen for bishop. So I don't think black is going this way. I think black is going to go here. But at that point, I can take queen takes knight with a check. And the king is going to step over here. And at that point, I have a discovered attack. Queen here checks king. King steps away. And my bishop grabs the queen. Let's see if that works. Oh, I wasn't expecting black to go here. So we're going to take threatening mate, and black's going to have to give up the queen to stop it. Good problem. All right, this is a great combination. I would call this coercion and a pin. Basically going to force the black king to a square, and then when he's on that square, there's going to be a pin, and I'm going to exploit that pin. The coercion happens right here with this check, forcing the king to h8. And now this pawn is pinned by the bishop. So that pawn is free. This is why you want to study tactics, because these are moves that you've learned to avoid. You've learned to avoid losing your queen to a threat like that. But that pawn is pinned. Checkmate. I see a combination here. It's a fork and a discovered attack. If I take this knight and I move here, I threaten queen and bishop, which is probably not a problem if the queen can move somewhere to continue to defend the bishop, except I now go from having 0 attackers in this position on the bishop to having 2 because of this discovered attack. My queen's attacking it as well. So I'm winning a piece here. Yep. All right, in this position, the white knight is not loose, but it's looking very suspicious. So I'm really tempted to try to activate this discovered attack and at the same time threaten the queen, which is the knight's only defender. Now, you might think the queen will just move here, here, or here to continue to defend the knight. But if the queen tries to stay here defending the knight, then we have a follow-up skewer. This rook can pop up here, supported by the queen, skewering the white queen. She's got to step out of the way, and now there are 2 attackers on that knight, and that knight's going down. Let's see if that works out. Let's try to distract the queen. Oops. All right, when we're all done, I'll show you the analysis tab so we can go back and look at the ones we got wrong and see where our reasoning was wrong. This position is really interesting because this rook is pinned. And if I take with my rook, it looks like my back rank is weak, and it looks like I could get checkmated here if I'm not careful. Queen comes back with a check. But the funny thing is, my rook could come back and be supported by this bishop on this square to block that check, and in so doing, reveal a discovered check. I could get myself out of check by putting black in check. So this is a really interesting tactic. Let's see if it works. Yep, and that's exactly what black tried to do, but I'm going to withdraw, and I get the check on the black king, and we win the queen. Excellent. All right, this one looks like a fork and maybe even a mate in 3. I've got queen to g7 here. Check. Forks the king and the rook. King is going to go in the corner. Queen takes the rook. King steps on to g7. And then queen f8 is mate. Dovetail mate. Let's see if that works. Check. We win a rook. And even better, we win the king. Boom. All right, in this position, it's easy to get distracted by this black pawn that's about to promote to a queen. That would be bad. However, we've got the opposition against the black king. One better than that, we've got the opposition, and the black king cannot go in this direction to try to run away if we're going to make a threat. And so I think rook to b8 threatens rook to h8, checkmate. And I can't see anything that black can do to stop that. Even if the black king tries to run up here, we still have check, and the king cannot squirt out here because the pawn has g7 covered. Let's see how that works. Promoted to, oh, interesting. I did not anticipate that. Promoting to a bishop to block that check. And do I want to check with the pawn first or check with the rook first? If I check with the rook, bishop blocks, pawn check, king comes down, distraction. I get to take the bishop with a check. King will squirt out here, but I've won that piece. Let's try this. And we're going to check with the pawn. Distraction, we win the bishop. Wow, interesting problem. All right, this is a really interesting position, and if you haven't seen this pattern before, you're going to love it. I believe this is going to lead to what's called a smothered mate. Let's see if we can play this out. If I were to check the king right here with this knight, if the rook takes, then I believe I have a back rank mate. Queen check, rook blocks, queen takes, rook blocks, queen takes, checkmate. So if I check here, the white rook is not going to capture. But the alternative is not much better. If the white king moves here to get out of check, now I have a discovered check coming because he's stepped onto the diagonal of my queen. And it might be tempting to say, hold on, that's a fork and I'm going to win this rook. No, 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 keep your eyes on the prize. We're going after the king. Because if you were to take this rook, even with the check, the problem is the checking piece is the queen and she's threatened and she's going to go down. So instead of taking the rook, knight here checks the king. And why don't we lose our knight to the pawn or the rook? Because this is a double check. When the knight moves, there's also the discovered check coming in from the queen. And in a double check, the only way to get out of it is to move the king. So the king has to move back into the corner. And that's when we throw our queen in. Queen here, check. The king can't take it. So the rook must. And when the rook takes it, there's no one defending this square. Knight returns to check the king, who is now smothered in the corner by his own piece. Let's see if that works out. Check. Knight h3, check. If you've got it all calculated out, don't be afraid to sacrifice your queen. If it gets you the king, checkmate. Here's the smothered mate. All right, this is an interesting position. I'm looking at this queen check right away. And I'm looking at this because I know the black queen will not block the check because my knight is supporting that square. And if I take queen takes with a check, the king's forced there. And right here, queen here is mate. So that would be a mate in that would be a mate in 3 moves if black blocked. So I don't think that's happening. I think instead what's going to happen is the king's going to move, and he's going to move either here or here. He can't go here because of the knight. He can't take the knight, obviously, because it's defended by the pawn. So if he goes here or here, I think he's going here because my follow-up is going to be to hit that square. I know the king will be checked, and the rook will be threatened. There's the fork that I'm looking for. And even if now the black queen might come up and try to block, but I'm going to take the rook with a check if the king is on this square. Let's see if it works out. Check. Here's the fork. And king goes up, and I'm winning that rook. Excellent. What happened here? There are 6 queens on the board. Holy cow, I would like to see how this game got to this point. There's 6 queens on the board. I think white has this position under control, though. If we just trade these queens off, queen takes queen. I don't believe king wants to take because then I'll grab the rook with a check, and I think there's a mating net there that does not look good for black's king. So I think rather he'll take with a rook, which allows me to just go ahead and capture this queen, and then there's no longer any threat of me losing my queen to a pawn promotion, and this pawn can't promote yet because I own the queening square. I think white's going to be okay. Let's try that. Takes, and then we're just going to grab this queen here, and we're good. Boy, that was weird. All right, whenever you see a position like this, you've got to be thinking zugzwang, and that's that endgame tactic. I should say usually an endgame tactic where your opponent is left with no good moves, and you want to just make it their move. And you got to be careful here too, trying not to stalemate your opponent. If I play queen or king here, I really want to do that to just kind of seal the king in the box so he can't step out of the way and promote his pawn. But if I do that, I'm leaving him with no legal moves. He has one other piece on the board that can move, and if I play king here and he pushes, how do I end up giving him a legal move? Well, I'm going to push this pawn, and then he's got a legal move. He can take. He has to take. It's his own legal move. I'm putting him in zugzwang at that point. But my pawn is closer to promotion than his is, and I think I'm going to make out okay. Let's try this. Now, be very careful here. White has no legal moves unless I give him one, and I definitely don't want to let the king out of the box. So I'm going to give him this legal move. He takes, and my pawn's going to promote. Good. All right, this is an interesting position. I'd love to checkmate the king in the corner, but the queen owns that diagonal. Not only that, she is threatening to take my bishop with a check. But I love this queen check here, forcing the king to f1. And after that, what do I do? Well, I think we can go ahead and trade queens. If I play queen h1 check, it would be mate, except for the queen has got to take. Rook takes, forces the king back here. And I think I'm grabbing this rook. And I think I'm up a significant piece in spite of being down 2 pawns over here. Let's see if that's going to work out for us. Check. Let's trade those queens. Let's check with the rook. Let's grab this rook, and I think we're winning. Good. All right, this position should be a huge red flag for you with the queen sitting on the same file as the king. But here's the problem. This is like a 1500 level problem. So these are starting to get harder, and that's too easy of a tactic. That's too easy. There's got to be a catch. What's going to happen if I throw this rook here to pin the queen to the king and win the queen? Well, my king looks a bit vulnerable himself, and I see this check coming in from the bishop. And if that happens, well, I can block with rook queen, but if I block with the rook, then I've given up my advantage here. But hold on, am I safe if I simply move the king here? I think I am. The queen cannot move to threaten me. The knight, if the knight wants to check, then I can take with the rook and continue to pin. So I think this works in spite of the fact that it looks like it looks suspicious, but I think it's going to work. Let's try it. Let's pin that queen to the king. Yep, there comes the bishop check. King here, and let's grab that queen. Good. All right, this is a scary position for black. This is funny because this is an attack that I love to play as white, and really just kind of crack open the king side. And if you play it wrong, the queen ends up getting in here, supported by a rook, and you get in trouble in a hurry. So what I'm worried about is that if I take this bishop, this pawn takes, opening the file, and now queen can come to h6. But if I take, pawn takes, now I could swing my rook over and say, hold on, I'm holding the file because that rook is supported by my king and this queen. And the rook could take, queen takes, I'd be fine, but then I'm looking at rook check, supported by the pawn. Rook takes, pawn takes. I'm a little bit exposed, but if I go back, then the pawn promotes, and I'm ouch. But I can just bring the queen over and block it. So I think I'm okay here. This is really, really scary, and you've got to check a lot of things. Let's try this queen. King takes bishop. I think I'm good. Okay. And then I think I have to control this file, otherwise bad things are going to happen. White's going to just swoop right down on me. There's that check I was worried about. Okay. And the move here is just definitely don't take with the king. I think I've got to take with the rook. Let's try that. Boom. Good. Wow. All right, here in a quick game, it's just going to be so tempting to take that pawn with a check, but then the king comes here. If you see a good move, look for a better one. And there's another check right here. If rook checks here, king's forced here. Rook checks here, rook blocks, rook takes. That's checkmate. So when you have the time, it pays to look and look again. Check, check, and there's the mate. Excellent. Oh boy. There's a lot going on in this position. Black actually doesn't look too good except for the fact that there are these checks here that hopefully we can make something out of. I'm drawn to this idea, this rook h8, skewing the queen off and checking there. That would be devastating if it weren't for the fact that rook here, if I play rook h8, then rook e8 checks me, and then rook takes and queen takes, and that would all unravel. So if I had this check in here, I'm just looking at it. King goes here, and then I think I can check with the pawn. King comes down. I think queen check, and if nothing else, I can pick up the rook on the fork, or maybe there's even a mating net there. I don't know. But if I play queen check and rook blocks, then all of a sudden maybe I could throw this over, except now the rook is moved and the queen can save herself by checking on f5. That's not good. So rather than do that, queen check here, and the rook can't block again because the pawn will take, so the king can't. King's got to go here, and then I'm going to win the rook with a check. So I think I'm picking up some desperately needed material here with this check, and I don't think this check leads anywhere because the king will escape there, and I don't have any more tactics. So let's try this. I think queen to d4. Check. Yep. And I think this check here is going to bag us the rook. Excellent. All right, these are starting to get tough. We're up to 1740. Let's see what we've got here. All right. I can't take with the knight because my queen's loose and the knight's pinned. But it says 1740 plus. It just seems to... Could it really be a counting problem? If queen takes, knight takes, rook takes, king takes, I'm ahead material, so I'm winning a piece here. I think it's just counting. But usually a simple counting problem you don't see at this level. I shouldn't be suspicious of this. I should just be looking at the position. I think I'm just taking this piece. Yep, it's just counting. Wow. Okay. Alright, this guy looks like just a queen sacrifice. We're kind of getting into that territory where we got to see some queen sacrifices. Very tempting to take a quiet move and sneak in here with a queen threatening mate here, but there's so many ways for black to block that. You got to be more forceful. We've got to play queen takes, h7, king takes, rook over check. And if the king goes here, then rook in the corner is mate supported by the bishop. So this bishop has got to block, and then we take, and then it's leading to mate. So this queen sacrifice is just begging to be made. Yep. And there's the mate. That's a pattern that you should be familiar with. All right. Queen and rook are threatened, but white has got some serious problems here. Rook takes check is supported by this bishop on b7. And this looks like a windmill waiting to happen. But the problem is it also looks like there's mating possibilities here. So I've got to figure out what's really going on. If rook check, king goes in the corner. And this is a pattern that you should look out for. It's called a windmill or a seesaw. If the rook takes the knight, there's a discovered check from the bishop, and the king has to move over. And then the rook comes back for another check, forcing the king in the corner, and then the rook can take this pawn with the discovered check from the bishop, and the king comes over, and the rook comes back and checks the king in again, and then the rook takes this pawn and comes back check, 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 and that's why it's called a windmill or a seesaw, because it goes around and around. And it's really tempting to just clear out the entire second rank of white with this. That would no doubt be winning. But the thing is, if I were to, instead of getting greedy and grabbing the knight, if I were to park my rook right there with the check, king comes over, that allows my queen to come over with a check. And because my rook blocked, there's like, it might not even be necessary, but any attempts to block this queen check are going to be futile, because there's no pieces that have double coverage on any of these squares. So I think rook check, king over, rook parks here on e2 with a check. Queen comes over, and I don't see anybody coming to the white king's rescue here. There'll be block, check, mate. So let's try that. Hopefully I got it right. Rook check. And then this is the critical move. I think rather than cleaning out the second file, I think I want to go for the checkmate here. And if I check here, is there anybody who's going to block? Oh, I should have thought of this. Is there anyone who's going to block the bishop's check? Yeah, the problem here is that both knight and bishop control this square where this bishop's check can be blocked. So if I park the rook here, that's not going to fly. Knight here blocks that check, and then my queen's hanging, and bad stuff's going to happen. So I think I'm going for the windmill. I'm taking out that knight. Here he goes. Okay. And yeah, that's the only way to block that check now is with either this bishop, which just goes down, or the queen, which is at least defended by the rook. And now if I take the queen, rook takes, I have a tempo to save my queen. So I think I'm just taking the queen with a check. Wow, tough problem. All right, this is really interesting because I have this pawn can take here or here with a check, actually a double check on the king. So the king is going to have to move. So there's going to be no blocking this check with another piece. And it's just so tempting to take the piece. Regardless, the problem is in this position, you can see I'm already down a piece. I've got 3 minor pieces and black's got 4. So just winning 1 minor piece isn't going to be enough unless there's some sort of follow-up, and maybe there's a mate here. But if I take king takes, the only way to get out of a double check is to move the king. So the king takes, and then I have this check, and after the king hides away here on c8, what do I have? I don't see anything. I don't see anything. But perhaps this check here, if I take this pawn on f7 with a check, bishop can't take because it's a double check. King has to take. And then I have this follow-up check. I don't want to check here. I don't want to block my queen. I want to check here. King has to go here. That's the only spot. And then I have this follow-up check here. And the bishop has to block, and queen takes, supported by the knight as mate. I think this is going to lead to mate. Nice. Check. Check. Excellent. All right, we're up to 1900. These are getting harder. I'm seeing a fork here, like queen check takes this rook. If king doesn't, king goes over to defend, then I have a distraction. Rook takes, king takes, queen takes. But then I'm still down a pawn. So how can I find something winning here? Hold on, what did I say? Queen check? King can't go here. What am I thinking? Queen check. Neither of these rooks are blocking. So king. Oh boy, this might work. This check just looks too good. Queen check here. If king goes here, then I get this rook for free with a check. King goes over, and I get this rook with a check, and I'm totally winning. If I check here and king tries to come down here, then I get this rook with a check. This has got to be winning. What else could it be? Keep our fingers crossed. Yeah, I'm getting this rook with a check. And now, is this the trick? Queen over. Check. Rook can block. That's probably not good. But then I do have another check here. There's something I'm missing here. I think maybe there's a mate hiding in here. If I check here with the queen, if the king moves over, then bam, this leads to mate. The queen down here, check. If the rook blocks, then I can throw this check back in, and if the rook tries to block here, now I've got two attacking this square, and this check is leading to mate. I think everything leads to mate here after queen f1. No, wow. All right, this is a pattern I think I recognize. This queen check here looks fantastic. However, there's one problem with it. It is a fork on the king and bishop, but I think it's an ineffective fork because this knight gets to drop back, block the check, and defend the bishop. And that can occur even when the knight's on the starting square. So that's something that you should be used to seeing when you're tempted to throw this check. So I think the tactic here is capturing the defender. If I simply take this guy out, what's going to happen? If I take queen takes, then I get to throw this check and I win this piece. So I'm going to trade these and I'll win that piece. Let's see what happens. Yep, queen takes. Now the fork works. Bishop blocks. But the bishop cannot defend this bishop. And I'm picking it up. Good. Okay. All right. What's going on here? I don't think this is going to be the time that I'm going to break my record of 42. Starting to get hard here. If queen takes, king takes, rook takes, rook takes, rook takes, pawn takes, then this pawn marches, and I don't think I can stop it. Pawn here. Then the way to check really quickly is if the pawn's here, then I'm 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares away from queening, so I'll go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this is called the square of the pawn. And if my king cannot step into that square on the next turn, then he cannot stop the pawn. And you can see he can't. He cannot get into that square. So that would be losing if I did queen takes, king takes, rook takes, rook takes, rook takes, pawn takes. If I play rook takes, my queen's hanging. If I take with the queen, rook takes, I'm just losing there. What could possibly be winning here for black? If I push, I've got a threat on the queen. And the rook can't take because rook takes. The pawn can't take because actually this might be a counting issue. The pawn is supporting the rook. I've got 3 attackers on this rook. And if that pawn goes away, but if I push, pawn takes. Queen takes, queen takes. That doesn't seem to add up. Oh, but if I push and pawn takes and I take with the queen. No, actually I don't do that. If I push and pawn takes, then rook takes. And if rook takes, then I take with the queen and I'm up a rook. And if he takes my queen, then I've got this check. I take this rook with a check. And the question is, will I also be able to pick up the queen? And I think I can kick the king around until I can force him onto this rank. Let's see if this has got to be it. There can't be anything else here. Takes. Okay, I wasn't anticipating queen taking. I should have thought of that. If I take with the queen and rook takes, I win this rook. If I take with the queen and pawn takes, then it's a counting issue and I'm winning the rooks. Bam. I'll take this guy. Wow. Yeah, these are getting hard. That was 2,000. All right. I see knight takes pawn with a discovered attack on The rook and the pawn is also supported by my queen, so am I winning a pawn with a threat on this rook because this rook is also threatened? And it just seems like it's got to be more complicated than that at level 2000, but maybe not. If knight takes, rook takes, queen takes, I've won some material, but then this pawn falls with a check, queen check, and I've got a block with the rook. But there's no perpetual here because the queen can't check again on d8. My bishop's got it covered. Let's try it. Ouch. Okay, that's the end. We ran out of luck. When you're done here, a good thing to do is to go back and look at those problems that you missed. And what you can do is you can click on them. This one, it really gets me. What did I miss at 1100? Let's look at that. So you can click this button to go forward in the problem. And that's where the problem started, right there. And my analysis was, oh, let's kick the queen. If the queen tries to defend, then we skewer and we win the knight. That didn't work. What was I missing there? Well, clearly I overthought the problem because now it looks so obvious. It's just a fork. Why do in multiple moves what you can accomplish in one? Rook to d4, forks, queen and knight, and there's no square that the queen can move to that continues to defend the knight. So, ouch. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at another one. What else did we miss? We missed this one. Okay, I'm going to hit the forward button to go to the first move of the problem. This is where the problem started. And I got the first few parts of this. I got that check, picked up the rook, and then this is where I went wrong. What did I miss here? I didn't want to play this check because rook blocks. Oh, but then I got this check here. Maybe that's it. Let's see if that's it. Yep, that was it. Oh, queen blocks. That was the other thing that I was worried about. But if queen blocks, at least I can trade rook for queen, and I'm looking pretty good. Yep, should have seen that. All right, that was a good problem. And then lastly, what did we miss on this last one? What is going on here? Here's the starting position, and that's the magic move right there. And I was assuming that if I played a move like that, even though there's this attack, doesn't the rook just take? Rook takes, king takes. Have I gained anything there? But I get to pin the rook first. That's what I missed. And we'll take the queen. Nice. Okay. All right. That's another session of Puzzle Rush with some tactical analysis, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Keep playing chess. Keep practicing those tactics. And we'll try this again. Thanks.